So let me quickly introduce myself, and then I'll ask Alfonso to give a quick overview of himself too. I am the Senior Director of Public Safety Integration here at DJI, and over the last, well, let's say 4 to close to 5 years, I've really spent a lot of time in trying to understand how could drones get integrated into public safety, and how do they help, and what is needed in regards to hardware and software solutions so that we can make this technology extremely helpful. And many of you have attended various conferences and potentially have seen me speak there as well. I try to be as engaging as possible because there's just so much knowledge that we can bring to you. And so Alfonso and I are going to share some of that today. Alfonso, do you want to give a quick introduction too?
Yes, of course. So hi everyone, I'm Alfonso Zamarra, and I am the Drones Activities Manager at the European Emergency Number Association. Yes, just like Romeo was saying, for the last maybe 5 years, I've been working on how drones can actually help for responders in the field. And basically, my task at ENA and ENA's interest on drone technologies, on how can this technology benefit first responders, how can we actually deploy it in an efficient and effective way, and also looking forward on what's going to be also the future of this tech for public safety. And then we basically, all this work that we do, we like to share it as well with all the different stakeholders, going from first responders, corporates, to even legislators as well. And that's very briefly on me.
Thank you, Alfonso. And yeah, Alfonso and I, we have worked together several years now with DJI and ENA. We have quickly realized that together we have a much better way of reaching public safety, and also be able to get the feedback back from public safety. So today we're going to look at starting a drone program, and what have we learned from the many public safety agencies, not only in North America, but also in Europe. And we want to give you some tips and tricks. So first of all, why are agencies turning to drones? And actually, it's pretty simple. Having this overview in form of a visible light camera or a thermal camera, or even other data sensors, gives us immediate intel, and that helps us to make better responses, which in turn means we can make an incident go by quicker, or we can also mitigate the risks on the ground. So there's a tremendous benefit of just having an aerial view. So that's why we want to see more of these drone deployments in public safety. All right, on the next slide, what we're seeing is that these public safety entities, from fire to law enforcement, search and rescue, and now also we're starting to see it in EMS, the technology is being integrated in ways we never really anticipated, and we're still early on. We're still learning of new use cases, of new tactical approaches to certain scenarios, obviously with the goal to mitigate the risk on the ground, to potentially save a life or a structure, and gather intel that we normally couldn't get with other technologies. And on the next slide, what we can see is that the technology is not only impactful here in Europe, like for example, Lincolnshire Police Department in the UK, a very active department utilizing thermal technology at night, and they have saved multiple lives already, including just over the last 14 days, they have been deploying a lot in the cold weather, at night when it's dark and it's difficult to potentially find a victim, but they have really a strong program. And on the next slide, we can see that even across the pond in the United States, on the fire side in hazmat, it has gotten to the point where it's making a big impact. Southern Manatee Fire Rescue is one of those leading agencies in regards to hazmat applications. So this is not just a regional tool, it really globally has become a new approach to integrate this technology. And so that's very, very fascinating. And on the next slide, we tried to keep a tally of vetted lives saved. So today we're at 310 lives saved, where we know that the drone was that integral component that made that saving happen. And there are plenty more that we just don't know of, but these 310 lives, those are vetted. They have a link that we can go back to and look at the data of it. And so this is extremely exciting because the value of these 310 people that are still with us, we can put a price tag on it. And what used to be last year, what used to be maybe once a week, we would hear of a person being saved by a drone, has almost become a daily occurrence now. And obviously this technology is making a big impact. So what does that all mean? On the next slide, we can see that there are challenges, and we got to be real. Starting a drone program is not easy. It does require a lot of research. It does require engagement, and it does require getting the approvals internally in your department, potentially in your city or county. And all of this is not just happening overnight. So it does take a dedicated person. And even once you have the framework and you start training and you start deploying, you got to sustain that operation. But the return can be tremendous, and it is a force multiplier. And that's why so many departments do decide to go through the process of starting that program. And we are here together to really plan and start talking and share information, because as you can see, as we go through those helpful tips, Alfonso and I will be talking a lot about what we have experienced with all the departments that we've been working with. If you start following some of these tips, your process may go much smoother than if you didn't do your homework or didn't follow our tips. So let's look at what those 10 helpful tips are. Well, Alfonso, one thing that I always say is don't reinvent the wheel. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think what we are pretty lucky to see at the moment is the fact that, well, 5 years ago, starting to talk about drones in emergency services was a very a rare thing, very, very new. And at the moment, although drones are still not fully implemented in many places, it's pretty normal to talk about, yes, drones for first responders. So there is a lot of people with plenty of experience out there, and I think connecting with the right people, especially in your own country, in your region, and learning from the early mistakes that they made can actually save you a lot of time and money, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we look at some of the tips for this one, Eric, if you can hit that, like Alfonso said, find other agencies in your region, and you already may know someone, potentially in your region, there is a leading agency. What we have, especially what I have learned is that everyone is open to share lessons learned, standard operating procedures or guidelines, training scenarios, hardware and software feedback. People are willing to share all of that. So don't just go and do everything on your own pace. Do get the larger community involved and learn from them. All right, so let's look at tip number 2. Start small. I always see these big visions that when departments that are about to start a drone program talk, they have this big vision and these many ideas of how they can use drones. And yes, that is all true, but our recommendation is start small, focus on potentially one use case, master that use case, and then grow. And similarly, I also say start small, get a small platform first, train on small platforms, learn how these drones operate and work, and then scale up. What do you think, Alfonso?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is actually my favorite tip of all. If you see how things are, for example, developed in the tech world, when you're creating something new, they have this what they call agile development, agile deployment, agile innovation, they call it. And it's all about don't start with the fancy trying to have the perfect final solution to the challenge that you have. So don't try to get, for example, the fanciest drone with all the different accessories, perks, and with a team of I don't know, 6, 7, 10 pilots suddenly. You may have the budget for that, but the risk of that is that you create something that doesn't really adapt to your needs. And then the drone ends up being a piece of equipment that's never used because it didn't really satisfy your needs. And definitely the best way, there is no right formula for this. I wish we could actually, the tips could be like, instead of a tip, kind of like the handbook of how do you create your drone program, but it's really experimental in the sense of, yeah, start small, start with something. To find this use case first, you're gonna have to test it out in different environments and then actually find the one that it's more relevant for your case. And then, yeah, improve, get an expert in that. And with these first experiments and this first experience you're getting, you're gonna be able to understand what you actually need. And you're gonna be actually able to show it also to your decision makers. And I think the best example for this would be Copenhagen. Greater Copenhagen Fire Service, isn't it, Romeo, with Thomas Sylvest?
Yeah, absolutely. You made some good points. You know, one thing that we also saw or have seen is that sometimes there's some reluctance, maybe on the city level or a county level, because they don't understand what drones can do. And we had a department that was experiencing exactly that. So they said, okay, let's first start just on indoor operations. And the city approved the drone program for law enforcement. And for the first 6 months or so, they were only utilizing the drone during indoor operations. And they got some really good wins out of that. They were able to really put together a nice package to go and present and say, hey, look, this is what we were able to do on indoor operations only. Now we would like to add on to this and use it in outdoor environments. And so it's like building blocks. You start small and you build on top of each other. And I think that is a good approach. Okay, so what is tip 3? I think this is a very, very important one. Be transparent, involve your organization, educate. I think that's one that sometimes gets a little bit overlooked in some ways. My experience has been that if somebody starts a drone program for a department, this person is the most passionate about. This person may already be flying drones for a hobby or for fun, and now he wants to bring this into the department and make it something also for work. And along the way, you gotta get your buy-in from your management, from your leadership, and you gotta also go outside of that and showcase the technology and what it can do and what it will not do to the community and to your leadership, your government leadership, your city or your county. And I think this tip 3 is the one that potentially can take the longest time to do. What has your experience been, Alfonso?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, I mean, at the end of the day, drones are another tool within the service, isn't it? And I think it's crucial on 2 elements. So we're talking about starting small at the beginning, so you can have quick wins. And this is something that is very important, especially when you are going to be showing results to your chiefs, to your commanders, to your managers. And that's important because if you really want to set up a sustainable drone unit within time, you're going to need political and economical support for that. And that means that the people on top need to understand why this is so relevant and why this is actually contributing to make your service even greater. So that's on one side. Then the other side, it's really on the more operational part. I think it's crucial for example, EASA commanders to understand, and we said on the last point, what you actually do and what you do not. Because maybe they have no clue what the drone can actually offer them as data on the field, or maybe they have a wrong vision and they are just there like, okay, yeah, send the drone over the building. Well, maybe you can't do certain things with the platform, and they need to understand what are the limits and the advantages of this capability. And even if we go beyond your own organization, maybe your other emergency services that are operating in your area could actually benefit from this. And I think a great example of this is the Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service, where what they started using drones and they started to interact with their police department. And now actually they are usually called by the police department to actually help them on search and rescue operations. And to the point where they actually got permission to fly together with helicopters and even to fly during night. And this is because everyone, the decision makers and all the different public safety entities in the region understood the advantages of it, and they really want to integrate it.
That's a very good point. Yes, I think in most cities we see one department that starts a drone program, and then the other departments may either look at that department or start to ask that department to come and help them, and ultimately the goal is for that other department to also start a program based on the experiences of the initial department. So yes, I think involving everyone that could have a stake in it is a very, very good decision to make. One thing that I do want to point out also is that the public may have concerns about a drone program, especially in law enforcement. They may have concerns that there are some privacy issues. That's why I think it's very important that when you start a program that you are vocal about what you will do, and don't just leave it at that, but also highlight what you will not do, that you will not utilize the drone for surveillance, for example, so that the public knows exactly what's being done and what's not being done. I think that's a great lesson learned.
Yeah, and even I think, sorry, Romeo, to add on what you're saying, when we talk about involving organization, community, etc., I think you should really think out of the box, because these could actually not affect, but actually influence the job of many people, or the opinions of many different people that could actually benefit you to have on board, or that you need to take into consideration. So just, you were mentioning police, but I'm thinking, for example, maybe unions also in fire services might be concerned because they may have the opinion that, okay, you're using drones actually to spy on us and control what we're doing, while what you're actually trying to do is contributing to incident commander situation awareness, and that means safety of crews, safety of staff, which is actually 100% aligned with what the unions are trying to achieve also. So by involving them, for example, you can also have that kind of support and understanding internally in your organization.
Very true. Good points. Okay, let's move on to tip number 4. This one is one that it is a lot of fun, actually, and it's very, very important, but it's also one that's a challenge. Test your equipment, train, learn about the equipment, both on the hardware and the software side. Really get yourself familiarized with the technology, with the use cases, do different things, train different things, and really put together a good documentation on how you can give that knowledge to other operators that may join the team down the road. Alfonso, when we've done some programs together, like the efficacy study, do you want to talk a little bit about that, what we're trying to test and learn from there?
Yeah, well, the drone efficacy study that we did last year was really aiming to evaluate how drones could impact on search and rescue, mountain search and rescue operations. And to impact, we mean like really gathering data on how we could reduce the time to locate the civilian that was lost. And I think, and touching this, it allowed us not only to gather data, quantitative data, but a lot of insights that we observed from doing more than 50 search and rescue operations with different teams. And it's very related to this point of test, train, and learn. And obviously, we could see the very, very big difference of junior teams using drone technology and the same platform being used somewhere else that has been operating with drones for quite some time, and the times to find the casualty were hugely different. Now, this is very obvious. Now, the point here is we shouldn't rely only on you investing time to learn to use the platform. I think it's very important, as Romeo said, to document it and actually to make it scalable. Because like this, you can transmit it easily to other teams, or you can even transmit it to other organizations that you may want to collaborate with, as we were saying before. And that shortens the learning time, the deployment time a lot.
Yes, and there are some really good documentations out there that will help you gather that knowledge. One of the biggest challenges we're seeing right now in training is that there is not a lot of standardization. And so we want to address this a little bit as well on the next slide. The challenge is that if we don't have a standard, then a department may train one way and another department not far away may train completely a different way. And now you have two different ways that are not really standardized. So that was recognized a couple, 3 years ago by NIST. And NIST is in the United States. It's the National Institute for Standards and Technologies. And they said, okay, we realize that we need to bring in some sort of a standard to assess not only hardware, but also flight capabilities. And so together, NIST with some other entities and very bright minds in the industry, we created an outline of what's a NIST course, training course could look like. And on the next slide, we have some visuals. It's in essence a way of building a training course so you can utilize not only the drone technology to get your skills proficient, but you also learn how to utilize the camera adjustments in order to get the data points you need and time it. And so you get a much better idea of where do I stand in regards to other operators, because it becomes the standardized way of training and testing. And the nice thing is NIST has made all of this documentation available, how to build it, what material you need, and we will have a link to all of their documentations in the handouts. So no matter if you're in the United States or if you're in Europe, this is a great way to at least get a basic standard done. And obviously it has been recognized that we need to do more to really bring a proper standard of training and certification into the public safety realm in regards to the utilization of drones, so it has meaning and is meaningful. Okay, on the next slide, tip number 5, integration. And that is a pretty big term because integration can mean a lot of things. So let's look at what we want to do here with integration. There's two major things. How do we integrate the hardware into the existing deployment model, but then also how do we integrate all the data that we're gathering so it becomes a helpful tool to incident command right at the scene, but maybe also later on, for example, if we do a collision reconstruction, we don't necessarily need a live stream right there and then. We collect the data to do processing later on, but all of this has to be integrated. And I think one of the biggest things here is to say that the incident commanders, they also have to learn what drone data is available and how to read the drone data, how to utilize it to their advantages.
Yeah,
Alfonso?
I think commenting on this, I think the first task that you need to do when talking about integration, it's very non-technical actually, which is very weird for us, isn't it? The people, including our audience, who are very techy in some sense. But the first question is, yes, what kind of data I'm generating? Who's going to consume that data? For what purpose and in what format, isn't it? And that's going to condition everything, all the work, because yeah, you were mentioning like in some cases you're going to need stream to stream information, in some other cases no. So yeah, that changes completely. If you're going to need, for example, a streaming box that's going to send the data towards, I don't know, a screen in a remote vehicle, or just take out the SD card and plug it into a computer, isn't it? So the whole process completely changes, and that's I think the first point for kind of like short-term, more operational elements. But then we're talking about data. Once we start generating this data, what we have the capacities of playing with it. And there are plenty of opportunities that are being generated on what you can do with that data to really deliver to your, for example, incident commander, a better insight, not just a video, not just a thermal imagery, but for example, I really like all these technologies that we are seeing that overlay geographical information over a video feed, isn't it? And you're now thinking on another new dimension that we couldn't before, but because we have the drone capabilities there, we can do it. So I think it's kind of like all these phased stages. And the first question, it's yeah, non-technical. And I think, and just closing my comments on that, Thomas Silvers from Greater Copenhagen Fire Service was giving a very interesting comment, and that this capability, this piece of technology, has to actually help my incident commander become a greater leader. And starting from that point of view, how do you do all the technical deployment? How do you do all the integrations, etc., etc.?
Very good point. Thank you, Alfonso. Moving on, number 6. And this goes back to kind of educate yourself. You gotta know your local regulations by heart and prepare for it. And you know, obviously in the United States we have the FAA. Here is the EASA, and there's a lot of changes that are happening, especially here in the European Union, with trying to come up with a regulatory environment that that is not just limited by one country. So there's a lot that is happening. There's a lot to keep up with. So it is your responsibility as the drone lead to familiarize yourself. But that's also an opportunity for organizations like ENA to come in and help. And maybe, Alfonso, you have some suggestions here, and maybe can talk about what ENA is doing.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely we are the legal framework, and I think everyone, including our audience, knows that it's a most thing that we have to follow. Obviously, it's very different in Europe because we are many countries with different approaches. So there are two things that I could suggest here. So one is a very good practice that we saw from the Croatian mountain rescue team, and we have a good example within our webpage about the job that they did to integrate drones within their air space management. And they sat together with their air control authority to create an app to manage airspace in real time. So you could actually, if you're going to fly a drone, you can mark on a map where you're going to fly, for how long, and certain variables, and then they can actually set up the airspace for you. And obviously they have levels of users, and the highest level of users is actually the rescue team. So they're able, just showing up on the incident, map the airspace, and that's going to be automatically set in the air traffic management, so they can actually divert all the different aircraft that are passing by. And it's an amazing step and progress that has been done, and that happens when civil aviation authorities and first responders sit down to understand each other. And I think that's a very important step. If in your region you feel like you can't do as much as you could do, civil aviation authorities, they might seem very distant, but what they're trying to do is reduce risk. And by sitting down and talking with you, they can reduce the risk perception a lot. And this is something a bit, and this is the second point of what we're also trying to do at ENA, kind of channeling the voice of first responders towards legislators. So this year we're launching a position paper that summarizes all the insights that we've been hearing from first responders. It's a very simple document because it's meant to be for regulators here in Brussels, but as well for national regulators to understand what are the specific needs. And that includes 3 key points, like having an homogeneous approach to public safety, which should include police, fire, EMS, and all emergency services, really contribute to create a standardized process of training and certifications, and really to have certain exemptions so you can actually operate flexibly in a flexible way. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Alfonso. And kind of what the next tip, tip number 7, goes kind of with the regulatory environment. As you may know, at DJI, we geofence our platforms because our drones have GPS built in. They know where in 3D space the drones are, and we can also then geofence and tell the drones, okay, you're not supposed to be flying into this area, like an airport or a critical infrastructure facility. But being public safety, you may actually need to fly exactly in that area, and you may have appropriate authorization to do so. So what we have done is we have created a Geo Unlock process for public safety, both in North America as well as in Europe. And in the handouts, we will have information for both regions, how to go about it. There is a small process to go through because we want to make sure your department's aircrafts get unlocked for the region you operate in. And we don't make it a small region, we make it a larger region because we also understand that there may be mutual aid deployments, or there may be disaster relief response projects. So we may need to unlock a larger area, but we have the tools, and it's called the Qualified Entities Program. And again, it's available both in Europe as well as in North America. It's an important thing if you're in public safety and you have platforms that need to be unlocked. We have the documentation later on, a link to it, and it's not difficult, but something that is important. So tip number 7 is get your Geo Unlocks if you're a public safety entity. All right, moving on. Standardize operations. And this is going back to kind of what we alluded earlier on, that it is a challenge that we're not as standardized as we could be. And yesterday here in London, I was presenting at the International Disaster Response Conference, and one of the topics was, what were the lessons learned from our 3 wildfire deployments in California from 2017 to the end of 2018? And one of the biggest lessons learned there was, if we all come together and talk with each other, train with each other, and we create these regional teams, we start immediately to standardize ourselves. And then when we deploy together, things will go so much smoother. So there was a tremendous difference between our first deployment to our 3rd deployment, only because in between, we didn't just go home and do nothing. The various departments in fire as well as law enforcement, they kept meeting once a quarter, indoors, talking about deployment strategies, issues that they have come across, Then they went outside, they trained together, they established proper comms with each other, and that really helped along the way. So that's one of the biggest tips that I personally can give is, you know, go look for your area, see if there's already a group that may be meeting with each other. If not, you know, take the initiative, start your own regional training group. There is a tremendous benefit in doing so. And I do want to say one more thing to this. This week, just a couple days ago, Alameda County Sheriff's Office, they were recognized. One of their deputies, Rick Hasna, received one of the highest honors in the United States from the U.S. Attorney General, an award for distinguished servicing and policing for his work in building a drone program, not only for Alameda County Sheriff's Office, but he went out and helped and worked with so many other departments all across the United States and even internationally. And it's being seen as a way to success, that sharing of information, that creating those regional teams and working together. So that to me is such a beautiful success story. Alfonso, do you have any additional thoughts here?
Yeah, well, I think you pretty much covered it. I would just say something quickly because I think we're going to be running out of time soon. But it's so if we want to improve something, so this is not something we're going to get right at the first time. And this is something, as we said before, that requires testing, requires experience. So the more you're going to use your drone, the more you're going to know how to use it. For really improving in an efficient way, you need to be able to kind of measure what you do. And I think the best way, again, since we don't have much documentation available, is actually to start documenting, even if you're going to correct it after, even if it's a very high level protocol of how you use drones. But that's going to help you standardize it to start with, and then to start testing it against the reality. And like this, you're going to become, you're not going to improvise when you actually show up with your drone. You're going to actually be applying specific steps, which are going to be perfection through time. So yeah, that's everything I would have to add on this.
Thank you. And then tip number 9 is, you know, go and network, and not only network with other public safety agencies, but join teams or organizations like EASA, drone responders, and others that consist of people that want to advance not only the technology but the use cases, and that is so extremely helpful. Going to these events, going to conferences where you meet like-minded people that potentially have the same struggles that you have, and just by conversing with each other, you may come up with solutions or find other ways this struggle could be overcome. And I think, Alfonso, you agree with me that this is a big point.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's as Romeo said, the more you interact with people, the more you're going to be able to share things, experiences, and even you're going to connect with other people that you can actually visit. And we have many of our ENA members that actually connected through our conference, and now they travel from Sweden to Wales to Copenhagen to Austria to really see how drone programs are being set up, and really to learn from each other, which is way more efficient. And I think, again, we are many different associations doing many different work, all of it very valuable. And I think it's a great opportunity for everyone to check the work that each of us we are doing. And the more you interact with all of the different associations, the best, because we are all learning and we are all sharing. So it's a great opportunity. Yeah, for ENA, which is my area, and I can say, like, for first responders, it's completely free to join. We have events, we have documentation constantly being published. You can contribute to it as well. So for example, now we are looking into all these SOPs, standardization, how it can be done. We have this position paper that you can contribute to, and many other projects coming up for next year. So yeah, definitely network and connect with people.
Perfect. And lastly, number 10, you will get to the point where you have to scale up, because if you do everything right, you follow your path, you will see the success and you will have to scale up. And it's very fascinating to see that up until the end of 2018, the big question always was, how do I start a drone program? And in 2019, we started to get the question, well, how do I scale up? And today we're seeing departments that have 30 to 150 drones. And that scaling up process brings additional challenges, because you have to now maintain a larger team. You have to track operations and training and flights and equipment. And while there are different software solutions out there like Flight Hub that we provide, you got to test these to see what suits you and your needs. So scaling up is something you should think ahead, not just at the time when you get your funding, you get the go ahead to increase your team. You got to have a plan in place on how to scale up. What have you experienced, Alfonso?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think you summarized it pretty well, actually. Yeah, just bear that in mind, and possibly this is why I think it's so important to document everything, because you're going to have to explain this to other people to really for this to really become a mainstream tool of your service, isn't it? And again, don't be closed and open with other organizations. For example, again, Greater Copenhagen, I think last year they recruited 20 new farfighters, and their drone program is so integrated on their daily operations that the 12 out of these 20, I think, new farfighters were trained on how to use drones. So yeah, that's basically it.
Perfect. So those were our 10 tips. Eric, should we open it up to some of the questions?
Yes. Now it's time for the Q&A. So if there are any questions, feel free to send them over. There's one from Timu Venascari. I hope I pronounced that right. Hello and greetings from Finland. My name is Timu Venascari and I work as a Chief of Development in Kymenlaakso Rescue Department. My question to you all presenters is that how you see having firstly safety features as main priorities when starting using drones in operative use.
That's a good question. And I think, remember when I early on mentioned that we're still early on in all of this. We are all still learning, from the manufacturers to all of you trying to utilize or already utilizing this technology. And so we're learning what is needed from not only a safety perspective, but also from a use case perspective. So one thing I think we're seeing more and more, and especially for our friends higher up in the north, where the environment is very, very different than in southern latitudes, technology will become better to deal with the environment, with cold and heat and potentially more humid or wet conditions. So I think that's one of the big areas where we see a lot of the changes happening in the future, additional features that come to mind for those really harsh environments.
Okay.
Yeah, I think into this, Romeo, very quickly, I think this is why it's so important to interact with everyone and to participate in all these activities from associations to really give visibility to your specific needs. I mean, if I remember well, Romeo, from the initial test that we started to do, like 3 years ago, the initial drones were much more basic, especially on resisting to water and wind and to rain and all these kind of elements, and even some features that we have now, like the new devices that the DJI, for example, is launching as well, that have more specific features for public safety and for public safety working environment. So yeah, I think it's a matter of time, and definitely the more everyone interacts, public safety, tech developers, and all the different stakeholders, the more interaction there is, the more everyone learns, and the more tech is going to evolve towards where it's needed to.
Awesome. Next question will be is from Richard. Any tips for the new regulations coming? How do you start small towards the new regulations, especially when it comes to BV loss operations?
Alfonso, you want to take that one first?
Sure, yeah. So what's coming up on legislation, basically? Well, now that we're having this new, the European framework that's coming out, the challenge that we have in Europe really, and I don't know, Rick, from where you are, but the challenge that we have in Europe is that we have all the national civil aviation authorities, and they're going to take whatever Europe is publishing, and they're going to create a framework based on that, hopefully more harmonized. But anyway, I think the challenge that's out there for public safety is the fact that there is no same approach for what is public safety. For example, if we think about aviation legislation on HEMS and medical helicopters, they have standardized exemptions, including risk mitigation plus training plus requirements for the aircrafts. So we need something like this, and this is a bit something we are trying to foster from ENA, and we invite everyone to contribute to our paper and to support this, to create this more standardized approach to Europe, which is not still included on the new legislations. Again, on who are emergency services that can have access to these exemptions. So it shouldn't be only police, it shouldn't be only defense, it should be all the first responder community, and standardized as well what should be the kind of requirements, risk mitigation, training, etc., etc. So it's coming up. I think civil aviation authorities are interested in leasing up, and there is some work that's being done in different countries. And I think the more we work together and the more noise we make about it, the faster it's gonna get here.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, as a tip as well on where to start, I think in order to get that approval for BV loss operations, try to find a way to prove that the BV loss operation is safe, and the documentation to prove that the operation is safe would support your application, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I guess each country is very different for this, so I can't give you a precise answer on how that's going to work in your own country. But generally speaking, civil aviation authorities, as Eric was mentioning, are extremely afraid of risk. So I think if you go with a speech of risk mitigation, of I'm not some sort of crazy person flying a drone, I'm actually a very professional, I have everything very well organized, etc., that can actually contribute a lot for you.
Cool. A follow-up question from Richard would be how DJI works towards organizations that provides training and equipment toward various public safety organizations, and how do we safely manage the organizations, particularly when it comes to equipment failure, if there is. Usually, finding that information comes in return is very limited.
I think a lot of it is going to be addressed in your standard operating procedures or guidelines. And again, you know, don't reinvent the wheel. Look at a department that is out there operating and ask them for a copy of their standard operating procedures and see what kind of language they have in there. Obviously, reality is that there could potentially be an incident. It could potentially be an operator error. It could potentially be a hardware issue. There are certain things that we are, as a manufacturer, are going to put out there in the not too distant future to help with, for example, maintenance, to do proper maintenance. And if you follow that regular maintenance protocol, you're mitigating the risk that you may break a propeller in mid-flight because you never checked your propellers. So things like that. I think we're again, as a community, are learning a lot right now, and we're trying to mimic the manned aviation approach more and more, because that's probably the best way to go about it.
Next question is from Lars. In what way will the new EU regulation will change the drone life and the public safety in Europe?
Yeah, I should take that maybe Romeo first. So the European legislation, what it's bringing is these more homogeneous framework based on the three levels of kind of operations and the risk of the operations, instead of the classic or initial approach of only based on the kilos, or if it's beyond line of sight, etc. So it's kind of more of a comprehensive risk-based operation rather than on the barely the qualities of the aircraft. So yeah, in that sense, I think it's quite an advancement because it's a smarter way of approaching how to create or organize all of this. Now, again, for public safety, what we encounter is what I was mentioning before. There is no major connotations for public safety, leaving it for the national country. So it's going to be your own country that's going to be putting the exemptions or the different advantages and requirements for public safety entities. So in that sense, it's also up to all of you to interact with your civil aviation authorities. So really getting to know what are the worries, and them getting to know your needs, so they can actually create a proper framework around your activities. And again, from our side, I think it's quite important to have a look at this position paper we're going to publish soon. Just feel free to use it, because it's a document that we are building with first responders from everywhere. So it's not some ideas from single individuals. And I think that could be actually helpful for civil aviation authorities to understand what are the needs of first responders. And you can get, you are basically backed by the experience of many people, not only your own opinion, which is very strong for your message.
Next question is from Bjorn. He's a firefighter from Norway, and they have a Mavic 2 Enterprise, which they use for locating wildfires and search and rescue. They use it and they need live streaming from the drone operator in the field back to the firehouse. Right now, Flight Hub Advanced is a bit more expensive for the small fire department. Are there any plans from DJI's side to make streaming more affordable?
Bjorn, that's definitely a big need. That's something we learned throughout our ENA projects when we work with our various pilot test sites. The need and the requirements for live streaming is really big, and it's a challenging need, because especially in rural areas, you may not have the proper bandwidth and connectivity to always stream. So there's a lot happening right now, and DJI, we opened up our platforms to software developers so that they can create apps and solutions that work on our platforms. And we're seeing a lot of interesting apps and solutions come to market that also offer live streaming support, and it's recognized that there is a big need. So obviously there is a Flight Hub, but there's also within our apps the option to RTMP, in essence, the live stream onto your own server if you have a server. So you can set it up so it streams to your server, and that's potentially a way to go about it. And then there are various solutions out there, from Kitty Hawk to DroneSense, to a lot of other platforms that work on our SDK that offer live streaming. There is some cost involved. Personally, I think in the future we will see more of the point-to-point streaming, so that we're not necessarily going over a 4G, 5G LTE network, but that we're creating mesh networks around incidents or disaster areas to do point-to-point streaming. I truly think that's going to be a need as well. So hopefully that answered that question. Do a little bit of research, ask some of your colleagues what they're using. There are definitely a variety of different solutions out there.
Thanks, Romeo. We have about 3 questions left, but maybe we have some time to answer a few more. Ollie from Sar Iceland. What are the best sources for training material or exercise suggestions?
I'm going to start with that one, and then maybe Alfonso has some additional. Hey, Ollie, greetings to Iceland. The drone responders group in the United States, they have members from Europe as well. They're actually pulling a lot of information together right now as we speak. That's one of their tasks, and there are some really good training programs, but it got to get centralized, and so they're working on that, and hopefully soon we will have or they will have a bigger documentation. I highly recommend to connect with them, to become a member. It's a free membership, and be engaged with them. One thing that we are seeing over the last year and a half, the real life based scenario training is so important. We used to train, on a field, on a soccer field, or just out in the woods. But what's really needed is those real life based scenarios where you have either a structure fire or a hazmat incident, or an active shooter, where things really are happening around you. And so this way you get the experience of being in those environments, and we're seeing more and more those type of trainings being offered at some of the most premier training facilities specifically for public safety, and I think that's going to be the future.
Yeah, I think from my side, I don't have much to add actually to what you say. I think drone responders actually are gathering some very interesting resources. So I highly recommend that you have a look on what they're doing. I would also say there are many people also offering training out there, and that's also something that if you're starting from scratch, you might want to have a look. But also bear in mind that this is something very new, and everyone is learning at the moment. So even if you go for having outside people to help you with the training, make sure that they have the experience that's required, and it's not just a tag on their kind of like curriculum on we do normal drone training plus emergency services, but they may not have that much experience. But I think these networks that Romeo mentioned are quite relevant to get information that you may need on this aspect.
Okay. So I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you so much for attending our webinar. I hope you learned a lot. If you want to have a copy of the deck and the recording, we'll post it on our LinkedIn page. Thank you for joining. Romeo, any last words? Alfonso?
Well, I definitely am thankful that you reached out, that you were part of this. If you need any additional information, look through the handouts. We have links and QR codes to a variety of different reports that we did with ENA, the unlock information. So engage with us, give us feedback, because this is also the way that we can improve. So thank you very much for joining us. Alfonso?
Yeah, same for me. Thank you very much, both DJ for inviting me and for everyone to participating. As Romeo said, feel free to reach us, feel free to engage. I highly recommend you to engage with everyone, because again, this is something very new with great potential of impact, and it's actually by working together that we can really shape how this tech can actually help first responders. So we keep in touch.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.